Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today for the Infragistics 16.2 webinar. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of cool demos to show. We've done a lot of great work over the last few months to get 16.2 in your hands. It's a continuation of some of the work we did in 16.1, and of course this continues to follow through around our whole story about delivering real productivity tools to help you build better experiences for your customers. My name is Jason Beres. I'm the Senior VP of Developer Tools here at Infragistics, and let's get going into what we did in 16.2. So what I'm going to do first is just do a quick overview of the what's in your toolkit. A lot of times I talk to customers all the time and it's like, hey, I don't really know what I have, or I didn't know what I get with my ultimate subscription. So first off, we'll talk about Indigo Studio. I'm going to show a little of the new features of Indigo Studio. We actually have a new version of Indigo Studio shipping November 8th, a little outside of the cadence of your ultimate subscription, which you did receive on October 24th. Indigo really is about prototyping, and we've enhanced the feature set with 16.1 around unmoderated remote usability studies. So not only can you wireframe, design an entire app experience without writing a single line of code, share it with stakeholders, do threaded comments on Indigo Designed, our cloud service, you can also create unmoderated usability studies which will allow you to share designs with any number of people after you create a test, and they can go through and do that test to see, if you were right on a button placement or if an experience matches what your user research showed. What you return from that is a report telling you how long it took people to complete tasks, a nice heat map which showed you where people clicked. But overall, we're trying to deliver this end-to-end design to cloud to test experience with Indigo Studio and Indigo Design. And we're going to talk about 16.2 as well, which also has some interesting new features a little bit later. Around the web, we continue to innovate. 16.1, we delivered a lot of interesting features which just push the limits of what we can do with the grid, and we're going to continue that with 16.2. But overall, with the web, you have pretty much any modern platform that you need to deliver applications on today. We've got Angular 1, Angular 2, we've got React extensions now, basically progressive web apps with our new Ignite UI JS blocks toolkit, every grid chart you can imagine. So as you start to migrate from your desktop to web experiences, Ignite UI is really where you should look. If you're a Visual Studio developer, go ahead and use Visual Studio MVC. We have wrappers for that. If you're doing Angular, go ahead and do that. And of course, we have full TypeScript support across every component if you're using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. And then on the desktop, again, we've been doing desktop now for 13, 14 years in the market. It still continues to grow. WPF and Windows Forms are still mainstays in building high-performance enterprise apps, and we continue to do work there. But overall, with WPF and Windows Forms in Ultimate, you get all the grids, all the charts, pretty much every UI pattern you can imagine to deliver on a desktop experience. And then around native mobile and phone, we shipped our Android product late last year, or early this year. We RTM'd our new grid. So you have Android charts and grids in the market. We've had Nucleus, our iOS product, in the market for several years now. Again, the Android product is written in Java, specifically tailored for to-the-metal experience on an Android device. We have Xamarin wrappers or Xamarin bindings for that Android product. And the iOS product is built in Objective-C, and again, we have Xamarin wrappings or Xamarin bindings for the controls in Nucleus. So if you want to use Xamarin with those products, you can. So you're not limited to just doing flat-out Objective-C. You can do Xamarin as well. And of course, we do have Xamarin Forms controls. And stay tuned for more announcements later this year and early next year for more news on what we're doing around Xamarin, because we see a lot of growth in the Xamarin space, and it's pretty exciting what's happening there since the Microsoft acquisition. Another big area that we focus on is data visualization. I'm going to show some demos today around what we've done in 16.2 for data visualization. If you remember, in 16.1, we shipped our 3D surface chart, which is a killer example of really pushing the limits of what we can do with charting and graphing on a device, and we continue to move that forward. So this is an area that we really focus on. We have a lot of key enterprise customers that use our products for varying types of visualizations, and you'll see that the key thing that we're trying to deliver is that consistent API across platforms. So all of the work that we did in 16.2 around Ignite UI, you get those benefits in WPF. Because of the way that we build the product and we do translation, you get the benefit across the board. And then of course, market leading performance. This is really where we love to play. It's around high volume, high performance data across the board. So in Ultimate, every single product has a focus on how much data can we render and how fast can that data be rendered. Again, I'm going to show you a couple examples today about some enhancements we made in 16.2, but we continue to push the limits around high volume, high performance data scenarios. And as you can see by the slide, we have a lot of key customers that use us in a lot of different ways, but they are also depending on us to deliver that level of quality in delivering what their users need. So when you think about Ultimate, I want you to think about the complete toolkit that you can build any type of application for any platform, for any type of experience that you need to deliver to your customers, and as well have that design piece up front. So I want to use Indigo Studio, I want to design this experience, I want to test that experience with my users, and then go into actually building that. So with that, let's take a look at 16.2, all its features, all its benefits, all its awesomeness. I've got some cool demos here. We've done a lot of great work. So let's start with WPF. WPF continues to get investment from us. There's two platforms really. I hear a lot from customers. Are you guys still investing? We want features. Don't forget about WPF. Don't forget about Windows Forms. We definitely haven't. It's a huge customer base for us. And though both of those products are way past like that 80-20 rule of 80% of what everyone needs is in the product, we continue to add. So the first item here that I want to talk about is our Royal Dark theme. So the Royal Dark theme grew out of our Metro Dark theme, which we shipped several years ago, which sort of was modeled after a touch theme based on Windows 8. Remember, Windows 8 wasn't like the biggest hit in the world, but it did introduce us to a rich client experience that did have touch. So that theme we've sort of recrafted and made it look even more modern, but although for a mouse-driven experience across your desktop apps in WPF. So the Royal Dark theme actually looks pretty slick. You can see by the screenshot here, a lot of the colors really pop, and we've tried to do that with all of the data visualization components and the grids when we think about these themes is really make that contrast really sweet. So we have light themes and we have dark themes, but Royal Dark is brand new. The data presenter, we've added a new feature called CrossField Filtering. I'll show a demo of that. Interesting story there. We have a customer that handles a lot of 911 for the United States, and they needed a better way of filtering out the grid to do anding and oring, but also grouping those anding and ors across different fields. So we implemented that based on their request. Now everyone can benefit from it. So it's a pretty sweet, sweet feature. On the data grid, simple feature, but when you had your field selector, we just added a select all option. So now you can select or deselect all the fields in the group. Let's say you have 100 columns in your grid. You want to deselect all to get rid of all of the columns and just select 3. It's a lot easier than going and clicking on checkboxes. Property grid, we updated so you have a data template selector support, so that gives you read-write at runtime, so you can customize the property grid however you like. The calendar control, we added vertical scrolling. So in the past, we had horizontal scrolling, which was good for most markets. In Asian markets and sort of the new way you see some of the mobile schedules work, they have vertical scrolling. So we've implemented vertical scrolling in the WPF calendar. And then a big thing for many of you who are trying the product for the first time or who maybe have a VM where you're installing a trial, you need to test something out. In both WPF and Windows Forms, we've removed the nag screens. So you don't have that dialog that pops up that says you only have 30 days or 20 usage days left. Which will make it a lot easier for you to build and test apps. Fast forward a few months, you'll start getting emails from us about being able to get product through NuGet, through continuous delivery. We actually ship NuGet today, but it's local to your machine, so you can put it on your local NuGet servers, and we're looking to improve the overall deployment experience for you as we get into the 17.1 and 17.2 timeframe. For Windows Forms, definitely still are making improvements here. Windows Forms has so many features now. When I look and see what the market is using, it's incredible, and they're using most of the things that we've shipped, but overall, there's still areas that we can improve. A lot of it has to do with this product being having so many years behind it. So we started building this Windows Forms product in 2003. we're moving on to 2016. That core .NET framework for Windows Forms hasn't changed that much, but the UI experiences have. So when we look at the first feature I have listed here, the Office navbar with peak control, this will help you deliver a modern Office 2013, Office 2015 experience, which of course you want to refresh your apps every now and again. We've implemented the touch provider in the past, which gave you touch. We've always had new Office themes or new Visual Studio themes, so we're going to continue that forward with new Visual Studio UI patterns as well. We actually added a whole new component called Application Zoom, which allows you to zoom in on any element in your Windows Forms app on, let's say, a tablet screen or a rugged device that you might be using in the field, so you can have a touch experience and actually see things a little bit clearer. So a lot of Windows Forms apps are very dense, data dense, so there's not much white space in the app. A lot of grids with a lot of rows or a lot of input editors. With this, you can actually zoom in on the screen, not necessarily it actually is just like a picture on your mobile phone. You zoom and it gets bigger. Well, we're actually rescaling all of the rendered text on the screen to make it bigger so you can see it easier. And I'll give you an example of that. We've also modernized the color chooser and the color picker. Of course, our color picker, original one, probably shipped back in 2004. Color pickers have gone through a lot of changes since then, so now we're giving you an experience that you would expect in Adobe or Visual Studio or any CSS editor to give you that extra capability or modern look and feel in your color picker. And then, of course, we removed the nag screen. Some of the other things we did around Windows Forms is we recertified for Test Advantage. So if you're using our testing tools for HP or IBM, those are certified for their newer versions. So if you want to download an update, that's great too as you move forward in 16.2. Ignite UI got a lot of love in 16.2. My demos will show more than this screen, but overall, we're continuing to push the limit here and what we can do on the web. The big things I mentioned earlier were our Angular 2 component extensions that we shipped, our React extensions that we shipped. So now if you're building off of any of those modern frameworks, you can use Ignite UI for that. And in fact, this morning I was just working with a big financial firm based in Canada around using our Angular extensions. Or actually, we've completed a POC and they're implementing using Angular 2 with the Ignite UI IG grid. So this is getting into the market. It's being used by customers. It's pretty exciting. Angular, React, obviously a lot of debate out there over which one's better, which one's faster, which one gives you more flexibility. Do you want a framework? Do you just want a UI library? Well, that's up to you. We really don't care. We want to deliver the best in both frameworks that you can build on for your apps. So as we go into some of the demos later, you'll see a lot of different improvements on the IG grid, some group by improvements. We enhanced a feature that we added in Windows Forms and WPF in 16.1 around collapsible column groups. Well, that's now on the JavaScript grid. Another really cool feature is this multi-row layout editing. So we added a multi-row layout this year, and now we allowed inline editing. So you have this whole tab experience within a multi-row layout, which gives you total flexibility on how you can not only lay out your grid experience, but then edit as well. So couple that with cool features like column pinning, cell merging, filtering, sorting. You have a really robust layout engine in the grid. Another new key feature is the virtual scroll bar. So if you think about how your phone works in your email, and when you tap on a list, the scroll bar appears, and as you scroll, you can see the scroll bar. Then when you tap off of that list, the scroll bar disappears. That's a virtual scroll bar. We've implemented that not only in the grid, but you can use it on any UI element. So you can choose to use it on an existing table and implement scrolling in your own table, or use it however you like to scroll a form. The zoom bar is that cool control that sits on the bottom of a lot of our charting samples, which lets you zoom in and out of date ranges or select date ranges. It's touch enabled. We've enhanced that not only to work with multiple charts on a screen, but multiple components that aren't Infragistics components. So if you're, let's say, using some other third-party grid component or a freebie open source charting component, and you want to have that capability in conjunction with what we're doing, you can implement that with the zoom bar, which is actually pretty cool. IG Combo, we just did a little update there on how the interaction works. We've updated the MVC6 tag helpers, so we're really fully all in on MVC6 and Visual Studio. Back in 15.2, 16.1, we added scaffolding support. So when you have your model and you want to right click and add a new view, we take you through a little wizard so you can splat out a bunch of HTML that uses the Infragistics editors or the Infragistics grid. Now we've further enhanced that with the updates to MVC6 with tag helpers. And then we've added a couple new samples around live data performance in the grid. And I will talk a little bit about that as well when I show some samples. Now, the other big news here is that we've open sourced the core of Ignite UI. So Ignite UI is a toolkit now with maybe, I don't know, 60 or 70 UI frameworks or UI widgets. And a lot of those are smaller widgets or really useful widgets that are like the supporting cast around your really rich grid and aligned business app or your data visualizations. So what we've done is we've open sourced all of the controls with the exception of the grid and the chart. And the reason for that is there's several reasons. First of all, it makes the process more open. You can go to GitHub where we have our repo. You can see exactly where we're at. You can report bugs. You can update our documentation. You can do a pull request and actually update code for bugs that you find. So it really makes it easier for you as a customer to work with Infragistics across Ignite UI, which is going to be a lot easier for you long term. The reason we didn't open source the grid and the charts is they're very super rich, super dense controls with tons of features. And personally, we've had years of experience trying to build these out and ensure that we give you the best experience across the board. So those will still be fully supported, or all the components are fully supported in the commercial Ignite UI product. But if you do need any of the other widgets that are open source, go grab them, go to town. So for example, if you need a killer date time picker for a project that you're working on, we have the best date time picker. If you need a great combo box, we have the best combo box, splitters, editors, etc. And I'll show you the repo, and we have a nice chart which shows exactly what we're open sourcing and what we're not open sourcing. And of course, with that, our Angular extensions for 1.5.8 and for 2.0 components, those are all open source, as well as our React extensions. And then the other big news around open source is we have a brand new mobile framework that we're calling Ignite UI JS Blocks. This is big news. This is like V1 of this product. It is going to grow and grow and grow, but we wanted to get it out with 16.2 so we could start getting feedback and you could start playing with it. The idea around Ignite UI JS Blocks is that it is an Angular 2 framework built set of widgets. So you are in the native Angular pipeline for the entire render experience. So it's not an extension like Ignite UI is. Now keep in mind, Ignite UI is based on jQuery, and so we're using jQuery underneath, and then we're building on top of that. If you want a to-the-metal Angular 2 experience, use Ignite UI JS Blocks, targeted for mobile, targeted for tablet, targeted for progressive web apps. They work really, really well. We're going to continue to push the limit on what we're doing here and what we're adding to this framework. So today, we've got features like navigation bars, tab, lists, editors, avatars. We've got a navigation drawer. We've got a single column list, which supports grouping and it supports filtering. And then in the future, we're just going to make that multi-column grid, which supports other features as well. And we're also going to get some DV components in there and some other things. So we're really excited about Ignite UI JS Blocks. It's pretty cool to build something from scratch, specifically targeted towards mobile, and it is based 100% on Angular 2. So you get the benefit of building from the ground up on an Angular app. So I'm looking forward to your feedback, and we'll show a little demo of this in a bit. Another massive investment in 16.2 was charting. So as I mentioned earlier, charting and grids is a huge focus for us. It's where we spend a lot of time optimizing performance. It's where we spend most of our time adding features, and we continue to push the limits here on charting. So what we did in 16.2 was we actually added a new chart called Category Chart, which is basically a really thin layer on top of the existing charting engine. Why did we do that? The reason is we wanted to give you a simpler, less verbose API. We wanted to give you better default experience. So for example, the labels are positioned correctly. You don't have to actually specify each individual field and an axis to bind to. We wanted to have a beautiful default experience as far as the styles go. So if you look at the existing chart across WPF, Windows Forms, actually across every platform, that's the chart core, and now the category chart is a new chart type that sits on top of it, which includes line, bar, area type charts, scatter charts, etc. So I'm going to show some demos of this, and you'll get the idea immediately when I show how easy it is to render a chart with literally a couple property settings, and that's it. So we're going from like this much code to set up a series and an axis and then bind it down to like literally one line. So it's pretty exciting. Mention a new control preview called Shape Chart. So back in, I don't know, a few years ago in WPF and in Silverlight, we actually had the ability to render any arbitrary shape onto a geospatial surface. So if you think about an airplane seating chart where you pick the seat that you want when you're booking an air flight, that is a arbitrary shape. If you think about this building where each room is and how to get around, that's just any shape. So it could be a shape file or any number of ways to render out that visualization. And so our engine would do that. And so it kind of came from our geospatial map. What we're doing with the shape chart is the same thing, giving you a modern way to do that across platforms, but then render scatter plots or density plots across that. So if you think about a tree map, a heat map, or a scatter on top of a geospatial space, it becomes really interesting. So think about IoT scenarios where real-time data might be coming in on usage of machines in a certain area, or on ATMs being used, or how much money's flying out of ATMs in a certain city or state or county that a bank might be trying to monitor. You can show density plots on top of that shape, and then you can zoom in and get different maybe heat levels for colors and visualization. So that's a new control that we're in preview now. We're going to RTM it in 17.1, but again, it gives you that really additional data visualization capabilities that we love to work on. And then finally, pie chart got some love. Believe it or not, it really wasn't MVVM friendly, so we added selected items, selected item property, selected items properties, so you can do everything in MVVM now. And then we added some selection modes, so you can have a single select, multi-select, or a manual select. So again, simple features, but very useful in a control like the pie chart as it continues to get more features. And then Indigo Studio, I mentioned that we have a big release coming in November 8th. The big feature we're shipping in November 8th is something called Team Spaces. So Team Spaces allow you to organically grow and control the designs that you're building within your enterprise. So for example, let's say you work at Big Bank, and Big Bank has different products, and each one of those products has different design teams. Well, the way that Indigo Studio worked today is if you had a prototype, there's a couple ways to share it. I could email it directly to you, and you could open it up on your machine, which is sort of complex to manage because then individual people are working on that design. Well, that's why we introduced indigodesign.com. Indigo Design is our cloud service where you can actually publish your designs to the cloud and then share them with folks. But if everyone worked at the bank, then I could see all of the designs that we were working on, or I had to individually share it with individual people. So if I had like 500 people or 100 people or 50 people on my team, it got very cumbersome to actually manage this. So what we're doing with Team Spaces is we're allowing you to create private team spaces within indigodesign.com, which will allow you to share it with a group of people that they only have access to. They're the only ones that can view it. So it's an invite-only system, and all of the designs for your projects could live in there based on what you're working for. So that will allow this to grow within your organization. You can just invite people to a particular space with the security that no one else in the organization can see it, and allow you to ensure that if you do want to invite someone, you can control that at a very granular level. So Team Spaces is pretty cool. We're really excited about that. Look for that and other cool announcements coming November 8th around Indigo Studio and Indigo Design. And then finally, before I get into some demos, I want to continue to talk about Report Plus. Report Plus is an amazing product. It is our mobile-first BI dashboarding product. You can download it from the Apple App Store, from the Android Play Store. You can download it right from our website for a desktop version to start playing with it. But it allows you to put the power of intelligence into your users' hands. And maybe that didn't sound right, but you want your users to create their own visualizations, do their own analytics. That's what we designed Report Plus for. So it's a really great tool which just allows you to get your data into the hands of users so they can make better decisions every day to run your business. And the nice thing is, as an Infragistics Ultimate customer, we provide an embeddable SDK. So you can take Report Plus and embed it inside of your applications. It has a slightly different licensing model than Ultimate does, so contact sales if you're interested in that. But the idea is that you may not want the end users to just use our application. You may want to embed it in your own application and have your own preset reports and your own experience that you're delivering to ensure that they have a great dashboarding and BI experience on their desktop apps. So with that, let's take a look at some demos. What I'll probably start with is WPF. So I've got a few things open here. Let me pop open our WPF sample browser. And first off, I want to just kind of show off the category chart. We have a few new samples here. The nice thing you notice is the colors are really eye-popping. So we've done a lot of work on the styling across the board. So this is the default experience you can expect for colors, label positioning, markers on WPF, and JavaScript for 16.2. You actually have a nice, really nice view. We've improved how tooltips work, so they're styled a little bit better. You'll notice based on where I'm hovering on the color, I get the right label on top of the, or next to the value. And then if I cycle through each one of these guys, so if we go to a column chart, you can see I got a bunch of data here, very dense data. And let's look at a waterfall chart. So here we've got even some more impressive looking visualizations. But if you just download the sample browser and cycle through, you get the idea that it's not only looks beautiful, but when you start getting into it, if I just look at this chart and I look at the XAML, let me highlight what it took to actually build this chart. So here, you'll notice we gave it a name. We simply gave it an item source. We told it where to go, set the title and subtitle, and that's it. So in the past, you would have had a pretty verbose API to actually get that chart rendered. Now it's one line. We've built intelligence into the chart so it will look at your data and make a best guess on the type of visualization it should render based on what your data looks like. Now, if you don't want to do that particular visualization, that's fine. You don't have to. You can tell it exactly what chart type to use, but we'll try to guess that ourselves. The other way that you can tell it what data to use, you can attribute your classes. So in your view model, you have data classes. You can actually go ahead and say, use this for charting or don't use this for charting. And then here we have an include and an exclude collection. So you can say include and then list the fields to include, or conversely say exclude and list the fields to exclude. The idea here, we want to make it super simple for you to render visualizations and not be an expert in the domain of charting. So a lot of cool samples that really show off the feature set of the chart, the new category chart. I highly recommend you take a look at this. It's pretty sweet, and we really think that the less verbose API is going to be very useful for you. Now, the other thing I talked about was this CrossField filtering concept. So here in WPF, if I click my field chooser area here in the upper left, you'll see I'll just click here. We've got a few options. I can show the field chooser. You'll notice here I've got my select all and deselect all. I mentioned that in the slides. That looks pretty cool. If I go here, I can show cross-field record filters, or I can clear. So let's go ahead and show our cross-field filters. And what you'll get here is a typical dialog, which you would get for anding and oring. So if you want to do a custom anding and oring, but this is a little bit different. So what we've done here is you have the ability to add and or groups and then toggle between anding and oring groups. So in this case, based on my legend, my or group is country equals UK and country equals USA, and then the and group includes contact name. So you end up seeing down here what the filter's like. Country equals UK or country equals USA, and contact name starts with A. So you can toggle these on and off. for anding and oring. So you'll notice when I do the toggle, my query changes, so it's a straight up and, country equals UK and, country equals USA and, contact name starts with A, and you can see that that turned to dark brown. Now when I clear that and change or toggle it back to blue, I get a different filter. So the idea with this is to give you a more robust filter, which will allow you not only to decrease the fields that are in the grid, but in some cases increase the fields that are filtered in the grid based on switching between anding and oring and then grouping those together. So it's a pretty rich way of doing filtering. And again, this was for one of our customers that basically corners the market in the US around 9/11, and they needed or 911 services, and they needed a way to actually get to addresses quicker and then contact the people that were going to go and do the work wherever there was a problem. Now I'm going to go to theming on the grid as well. Let me scroll down here on our theme pull down, and I'll grab Royal Dark. So this is our Royal Dark theme. You can see that it's nice and black here, but when I click it, you've got the purple, and that's where the royal comes from. If you're not familiar with the color of royalty, it's purple. So if you live in the UK, for example, a lot of purple around the Queen and the King, because that is the color of royalty, hence the name Royal Dark. But this is one of the most highly sought after feature requests from us is this dark theme. So already we just shipped a few days ago, and we're getting tons of emails back from customers saying thank you for the Royal Dark theme. So it does look beautiful across the board. So I highly recommend that you check it out. And then also the pie chart, I'll just quickly show this. You can see that my selected item property is showing up. And I can change my selection mode. I'll just change it to multiple, and then you'll see that I get a selected items collection of what got selected. So it just makes it easier to interact with the pie chart and sort of makes more sense for the types of apps that are using MVVM, because if we don't support MVVM on all the controls and you have one that's an outlier, you have to write code, and it's really not a good experience. And in this case, we've got our editing template selector here on the property grid. So as I spin up, basically I have a custom editor, and this again will return a read-write value back to whatever this data is bound to. So this is another really useful feature. The property grid ended up being one of our most sought after feature requests when we shipped it a few years ago. So definitely, if you're not using the property grid, check it out. It's a really useful component. All right, so moving on. Let's take a look at some of the Windows Forms features. I popped open the Windows Forms sample browser before we started, and actually here have a few demos I want to show. First off, let me launch the color picker, and this will just really demonstrate some of the enhancements that you get. So what we did with the color picker is we allowed you to use it as a standalone component that you could put in any container, or it's in a drop-down. So we always had the drop-down editor for the color picker. You still have that, but as well, the component breaks down so you can use it really in any way that you want. So you can see here, this gives you basically a super modern color picker experience. You get the hex value, you get the alpha levels, you've got an eyedropper, so you can use the eyedropper wherever you want, and you can do custom colors on this as well. So again, modernizing the experience, color picker is part of that. It's pretty important. Second, the Office Nav with Peek. So let's take a look at this guy. This is pretty slick because this is your nav bar down here, and you'll notice as I hover, I get my Peek window. So every version of Office has this forward from 2013. So when you open up Office and you're hovering over your collapsed menus on the left or on the bottom, you get this peek control. The nice thing about the peek control is we've styled it so it works really well with the Office nav bar, but it's a container that you can put anything in. So any sort of information that you feel you need to use with this peek control. And of course, this we've defaulted to the day, week, month, just like you'd see in Office. You can use this nav bar for anything that you'd like. So if your application is a line of business app, this could say customers, orders, and reports, and then you might have some preview pop up in the peek as people hover over. So super useful control. Obviously a lot of different properties like orientation, text overflow, text placement, etc. Just like everything else we do across the Windows Forms components, it's very extensible. And then the zoom panel, which I talked about earlier, let me pop open this guy. Again, this came out of a customer emailing us a couple years ago and basically said, listen, I need to be able to ship my Windows Forms app on devices that might have a touch screen, or I might want to zoom in with a mouse, but I want the whole screen to scale. I want every editor on the screen, the grid, the calendar, everything. I just need it to scale for whatever the zoom level is. And that's basically what we're doing here. So as you see, I'll just go ahead and drag my zoom factor. It's as simple as that. Now, you might say, yeah, it's as simple as that. It actually gets pretty dicey to build something like this because of the way that we are composing the grid and all the elements within the grid. So it took us some time to make sure that this worked. If you have editors in the grid, if you have other components in the grid. So it's a pretty sweet control. And again, it really will modernize a Windows Form experience for this Zoom panel provider. As well, if you're just looking for touch, keep in mind we do have the Ultra Touch provider, which when you drag onto any form, it makes all of the touch points bigger, so it gives you that 9mm buffer, which is the standard for based on UX research about what a touch point should be. So that Ultra Touch provider will keep your application looking at the same scale that it is, but it'll make touch points actually bigger. So we have a couple options there for touch in Windows Forms. And of course, we have the nice touch-friendly themes as well. So let's jump over now to Ignite UI. So we looked at WPF, some of the feature enhancements there. We looked at Windows Forms. Now Ignite UI, again, we continue to push the limits, and this all goes into that develop story. So remember, Indigo design is around design. We want you to have that entire end-to-end design experience with the cloud experience, with unmonitored usability testing, team spaces coming down the pipe. And then once you do design that, you have to build it. So what are you going to build it in? You're going to build it in, we're going to build it with Infragistics Ultimate, but that could be Windows Forms, WPF, or in this case, Ignite UI, which we do get a lot of customers now either starting brand new web projects or migrating their desktop applications to web. So Ignite UI will continue to get a lot of effort from us. The nice thing about the sample browser, if I just scroll down a little bit, is that there's a few buttons across the top here where I can show all of the samples. So you can see here basically every widget possible, and then you click on a widget, it gives you the individual samples. I can click new or updated, which is just going to show me all of the new samples that we shipped for this release. So you can see there's a lot of work done across all the controls here. Or I can ship OSS. OSS is an easy way to filter out all of the controls that are open source. So now that we're on the open source discussion, how do you find out what's actually in open source? We'll just go to github.com/Ignite UI. And if I go to Ignite UI, actually, this is one level in, you're going to see a few repositories here. This is a warehouse sample, which is built on our new JS blocks. Here's our new JS blocks controls. Here's our Angular 2 components. And then here's Ignite UI. So you'll see we've got a lot of commits, a lot of watchers, lots and lots of stars, 328 stars. So a lot of good things happening here. But if I scroll down, you'll notice that we've got a nice graph which shows what's in the open source version, what's in the Ignite UI full version, so you get it all over the place, and then what's in Infragistics Ultimate. One thing I want to stress, Ignite UI is fully supported by Infragistics. Our development team, this is their repository. This is how they work. They're checking things in every day. They're working on these components. As an enterprise customer, as a small business, as a single individual developer, don't worry. Just because we open source it doesn't mean we're not supporting it. You get the full support. Go to our forums, get support. So it's a fully supported product. But you can see a couple things that aren't open source. Our Excel engine, our Grid Excel exporter, those are all related to the grid. We start getting down into all of the data visualization components, and then the various grids that we have the red X's. But you can, of course, get those in the full version of Ignite UI, in the commercial version and in Ultimate, and then the features. Now, the nice thing that we did here, if I go ahead and click on something like column grouping, on the GitHub repository, it takes me right to igniteui.com, which is the sample for that particular feature. So, and this happens to be the grouping API actually happens to be one of the new features, which I'll show right now since we're here. But with the grouping API, we've actually added, enhanced some commands to collapse all and expand all once you actually have a column group. So let's go ahead and group by ship city. So now you can see that we've grouped here. So I've got my counts per group, and I can go ahead and I can expand all my groups. I can collapse all my groups. All this can be done through JavaScript on the client side. But anyway, that just kind of led into this sample because we came from the GitHub repository. So if I go back and I go back, we end up back here. So go ahead, play with this from the open source perspective. Go do pull requests, give us suggestions. All of our documentation across the board is open source. So the documentation for WPF, the documentation for Windows Forms, the documentation for Ignite UI, it's all on GitHub. So if you find a bug in the docs, or you want to make improvements to docs, go for it. It's all there. Obviously, that's how we're improving it and where we go to make our updates. So make sure you go check that out. Now, if I go back to my top level Ignite UI, remember I talked about our Ignite UI Angular 2 components. These are all here. So with some instruction on how to use them down below. So requirements to get these working, running the samples, getting started, and then what the tags are to actually use these components in your Angular 2 app. So and then some samples down here. Now the cool thing about this is we've got full samples. So I went ahead and I already started this up. So I'm using NPM, and I just started up our Angular 2, and I've got our JS block samples running right from my local repository here. But the idea with this product is that every component that we have, every Ignite UI component and control that we have an Angular 2 component for, we have samples and code that you can go grab and learn how to use in your application. So you can see here, this is an actual running grid. You know, I can go ahead and interact with it and do all this stuff and edit and whatnot. And then here is the Angular code to actually do it. This is the component. So I've got my grid here, and I'm setting up all of the options for my grid. So the syntax is what you would expect, but it's in line with how you would actually do your bindings and how this would work in the Angular 2 pipeline. So if I want to see how other components work, I can go down here and I can, for example, check out the IG data chart. And this will bring up the data chart sample. So I've got a nice sample, and then I can go ahead and explore the code. Down here, I got my zoom bar. So this is this little widget down here where I can expand and collapse and grow and shrink what I'm showing across a visualization. That's the zoom bar, and that's, again, where we added that extensibility feature that I talked about earlier, where you can use it with multiple Infragistics components on a form or on a page, or with any third party as well. So if you're interested in Angular, please go check out our Ignite UI Angular 2 components. Same thing, if I go back to our GitHub repository here, and I go back to Ignite UI, and I scroll down, I've got my Ignite UI JS blocks. So these are open source Ignite UI components. I mentioned earlier, I had a quick little slide on them. If we go and look and see what's in here now, we've got a bunch of different stuff. So I've got avatar, badge, button, carousel, checkbox. As we scroll down, you can see we've got inputs, labels, etc., modals, navigation drawers. So we're talking a good, I don't know, 15, 20 components that we're going to keep growing. Why are we building this? The reason is you need to build mobile apps. There's so many mobile frameworks out there, and if you're already building with Infragistics, or you're just starting with Infragistics, you don't want to have to go to some other framework to get a button or some other framework to get a navigation drawer. So we're going to fill out this entire framework with all of the necessary components that will help you build a phone, a tablet, a progressive web app, and we're going to add even more value to it around grids and charts and some of those richer controls like scheduling. So stay tuned. This is just the beginning. This is V1. And if I go ahead and I just look at these samples that I started with NPM, this is our very simple sample browser here. So we've got like the carousel control, we've got the tab bar control, which basically can sit at the bottom or the top. We've got our list control, which shows different lists with filtering and searching enabled. We've got buttons of different styles, avatars, the navigation drawer, so you got this whole experience that you'd expect in every mobile app, and then a nav bar, and then a new sample, a brand new sample that we just shipped today, which you should go check out, is called the warehouse sample. So if I go back up here and I go back here, go check out the warehouse sample. It's called Warehouse.js blocks. This is showing how to use a list, how to use a button, etc. The nice thing about all of these components is that we're using Material 2. So Material 2 as our CSS, which means if Google adds new icons or they update a font, it passes right through into JS blocks, meaning you get all the benefits of what Material 2 is doing from Google as well. So it's pretty sweet, and we have some nice samples there. I highly encourage you to go check out. So that's enough about the open source side. Again, we have React up there too, so if you're doing React, go check out our React extensions for Ignite UI, for the grids. Let's take a look at some of the new and updated features. So one of the ones that I want to highlight here is this binding real-time data sample. This is pretty cool because it shows you how to use the grid with Signal R to implement a real-time data scenario. So what you'll see as this, and I'm going to stop the data feed. I'm going to lower the refresh time. So every few seconds, you're going to see the spark lines in the last column update, and you're going to see some of the arrows go up and down and different rows get highlighted. Actually, the highlighting rows come across a little bit in the green here. But the idea is we wanted to give you a sample which showed the grid in a real-time data scenario. So you have all of the code which shows you how to do that as well. A lot of our customers are doing very data-intensive grids, which is where we shine. They're doing a lot of virtualization, and so we're going to put out more examples with Ignite UI on how that actually works. Likewise, if I scroll down, I want to show off one other feature that has to do, actually let me just go to new and updated, that actually has to do with performance, and that is our performance options sample. So again, this is a new sample. I was just at some customers in Japan a couple weeks ago, showing them how these samples work, because the major concern of any customer is that, great, I can see the grid in a demo, and it always looks great in the demo, but then when the developers try to use it and we start adding features, the performance slows down. So we're going to continue to push samples out which show the trade-offs. So hey, if you add these 5 features together or this many rows and columns, you might have this particular performance hit. So this is just V1 of that story. But what I want to do here is I want to up our row count to 20,000, and I've got 10 columns. We got continuous virtualization, and I will enable filtering, and I'll go ahead and rebind the grid. So this is going out to a server. It's getting 20,000 rows of data, and then it's sucking it back down into the grid. So now, if I scroll, you'll notice that it's perfectly seamless scrolling. And what happens is, because virtualization's turned on, you'll notice this little widget down here is telling me how much time it's taking for each row to render. So this is like milliseconds on each row, because we have a viewport and the data is still there, cached, but we're only loading up the data into this viewport of DOM elements that are already created. So we didn't create every DOM element in the grid. We actually just created what we needed to view on the screen. And the same goes for columns. So you'll notice that I get perfect seamless scrolling on columns back and forth. And if I scroll all the way down and I scroll all the way to the left, this is 20,000 records. So the performance that I'm getting here for 20,000 records is pretty phenomenal. Now let's up this to 20 columns with filtering. And again, it's going back to the server. It's going and sucking down 20,000 rows, 20 columns on this network that I have here. And again, super wicked scroll speed, both vertically and horizontally. It doesn't get any better than that. So we're talking about major performance here. Take a look at these performance scenario samples on the grid. I think they'll answer some questions that you might have, and they'll also open up your eyes to using something like virtualization to really deliver the type of experience that your end users want over this high volume data. Another major feature I want to highlight is around multi-row layout and inline editing. So across the top here, you'll notice I've got what we call a multi-column header. So what this allows you to do is sort of group columns under headers. So I have company, and then under company, I've got country, city, and address. I've got sales, I've got quarterly, yearly, market potential. So I'm kind of breaking this up into like a different layout, and my data renders different ways. So it's easier to read. What ends up happening is if I had this all in columns and single rows, it's very data dense, it's very hard to read. So you want to give your users a little bit easier way to view this data, and maybe you don't want them to scroll back and forth. But the nice thing here, you notice I've got my add new row, and as I pop into my editors, I actually have tab stops, so I'm doing all inline editing within the grid. And this is really where the money's at. So you can create a table on HTML and have a complex layout. But what can you do with that table? Not much. We have grouping, sorting, filtering, editing, column collapsing. So we're pushing the limits here on what you can actually do with the grid on these really complex layouts. So it gets pretty exciting. Couple that with collapsible column groups. So same concept. I've got this rich layout. In this case, I am not doing any editing, but I do have multi-column headers, and I've sort of grouped things into single rows. But what I want to do here is you'll notice this glyph on the top header areas. That is a little collapse indicator. So I can collapse and expand these groups. So company information has company name, contact, contact title. When I collapse it, the only thing that shows is company name. Fine, seems easy, no problem. Now this is where it gets pretty cool. Under address, I've got my street, city, zip code, phone number. Let me go and collapse that. You'll notice what we did is we actually retemplated this column to be the full address. So not only does that show the street, but it shows the city, and then we have these other fields that basically disappeared. So you can have any layout, any template for the multi-row layout or the collapsible column based on what you want to display. And it's honestly, if you look at how you're creating the group headers here, you've got groups within groups on the headers, so it's super easy to define. And then if I scroll down, you'll notice that I'm just retemplating my column based on a collapsed mode or an expanded mode. So it is super simple and super powerful to actually do that type of a layout with the features in 16.1 and 16.2 with the Ignite UI grid. Now the other one here is a custom modal dialog. So what we have is this concept flat out of the grid. If you say enable row editing, you get a edit dialog. It'll just pop up a modal. It has this stuff here for you, and you can go ahead and do your CRUD. What we did with the custom modal dialog was we just gave you the ability to do some additional stuff on the screen with the dialog. So you'll notice here, as I select the row, this dialog data changes. If I hit escape, the dialog sort of disappears. So it's just another way to present data to the user, and it just we give you the extensibility to be flexible on how you want to render that data. Let me scroll back up here. Let me see if there's anything more interesting on the grid. Probably not. I think we covered what we wanted to there. Now for the category chart, again, same story as you saw earlier. I actually have something a little bit simpler here just to show you how few lines of code you actually need to write here. So this is just a quick fiddle. This is all you need to tell it to bind this data, which is hidden. Let me scroll up a little bit. This data to this chart area, that's all you need. Nothing else. You don't need to do a bunch of code to show, here's my series, here's my axis, here's my other axis, here's my other series. We actually have that data layer. It inspects the data, and it decides what type of chart to actually render. Now, if you want to force a different type of chart, like I said earlier, it's as simple as just telling it what sort of chart type that you want. So in this case, I can say I want my chart type to be column, and I'll just go ahead and rerun this, and like magic, I have a column chart appear. So though we try to build intelligence into what you're going to render or what will render, we also give you that flexibility on specifically saying what type of chart that you want, or what fields that you want, or if you want a legend or not. So again, it is very, very exciting because this is essentially 2 properties. You really only needed 1, and you're rendering out a multi-series chart. So super, super cool. And that's the category chart. But that's not everything about the chart for this release. I want to talk about performance real quick, because like I mentioned before, we did a lot of work on performance, especially on JavaScript. We did a few things. We refactored the core data chart library down to a bunch of smaller pieces. So previously we had chart types, or types of charts. So you had category chart, you had scientific charts. Each one of those were like different JavaScript files. Well, now we've called it out even further. So we have a lot more smaller JavaScript files based on the features you need. Please use our script combiner to use that, or use our loader, and our loader will intelligently download what it needs asynchronously with AMD. So, but the point on top of that is we looked at high performance rendering on high DPI screens. This screen is a Dell XPS 13. It's the 2013 version. It's a 2900 by 2100 screen resolution, so it's high DPI. Newer machines like that Surface Studio Pro that was just announced is a 40,000 by 30,000 pixel screen. It's like 63 million more colors than a 4K. I mean, it's incredible. But what does that mean? It means that you need to be able to push pixels equally as fast on that level, or that dense, compared to something that's less dense, like an old MacBook or something like that, even though the newer MacBooks have nicer screens, high DPI screens. But anyway, let me just go ahead and show you this. I'm going to bump this up to 1 million data points, and I'm going to hit refresh. So this is basically going to refresh this in a couple milliseconds, and it does it really, really fast. But what I want to show is, as I zoom into this, notice that I have the same high DPI fidelity no matter how I'm zooming in. And this is a touchscreen device, so I'm actually just using my fingers on the touchscreen. And the interaction on the screen is like instant back and forth. So like as soon as I start touching, I get that reaction on the chart itself. We're the only ones in the market that can do this today with high DPI, high volume. This is 1 million data points pushed on a high density screen, and I get instant touch. Even cooler, if I look at my real-time data example, and I'll scroll down a little bit, and let me add up here. This one goes up to 50,000 data points. So I'll add those. I'll start my data feed, and it's the same thing. You'll notice that I get that perfect touch, just like so. Okay, so what's really cool is now I'm going to open up my iPad. This is an iPad Pro, 9.7 inch, so it has a high DPI screen. And I'm going to select my Air server here, and it'll come up here on my screen. Make it big. Great, thank you. Thank you. So this is the same sample. Basically what I did is I went to igniteui.com. I'll just refresh it so you don't think there's any smoke and mirrors here. Let me scroll down. I'm going to go ahead and add 50,000 data points. And you'll notice I'll kind of hold it like this as well so you can see. But as soon as I touch the screen, I get responsiveness. And this is what we're after. So with this chart, not only can you pump tons of data onto a device, basically, of any size, iPhone, iPad, it really doesn't matter, but you've got this seamless touch experience. So I'm building for a big desktop, a progressive web app. I'm building on Chrome, or this is Safari, it doesn't really matter, or Edge. I get this seamless experience. You can see on the bottom here as I'm scrolling, I have inertia, which is just incredible for HTML5. I mean, it's truly, truly incredible. So we are going to continue to improve performance and push the limit, not only on the grids, but on the charts as well. Because with IoT,
you've got tons of data coming in real time, and we're doing IoT products right now for some of our biggest customers where they're using our data visualization controls, and they're like, hey, we need to, a lot of sensory data is coming in, a lot of machine data is coming in, and the way that they want to do analysis on IoT nowadays is they want to see data coming in real time, but they also want to give their users the ability to do some level of analytics on that. And honestly, that's where Report Plus comes into play, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let me just show a couple more examples here, and then we can move on. Let me scroll down to our scroll bar. This is a real simple demonstration of the scroll bar. This is the virtual scroll bar over a table, but I just want to highlight that as I move the mouse in and out of the scroll bar, you'll see that it disappears. And now when I move in, the scroll bar is there. So same if I'm doing touch, I'm touching the screen, I go off of it, and then the scroll bar disappears. So that's the point of a virtual scroll bar. It's really cool when you start using it on a device like an iPhone. So you're used to touching it where the screen, the scroll bar shows up and then it goes away. So anyway, as we start building out hybrid apps with JavaScript, with Angular, like progressive web apps, which Ignite UI and Ignite UI JS blocks are perfect for progressive web apps, go ahead and use those components. So that about covers it for Ignite UI. What I'll go to next, real briefly, is Indigo Studio. So with Indigo Studio, like I said, we have a big release coming November 8th. I'm going to do another webinar with George Abraham, who's our product manager on Indigo Studio, the week after November 8th, so you can really get a feel for what we've done in Indigo. But in the meantime, I do want to show off a little bit of the features here with Indigo Studio since we have a little bit of your time today. So this is starting up a dev build of Indigo Studio. It's an internal build because some of the features that we're shipping on November 8th aren't quite there yet. But what we've done is on your file open screen, you've got your recent projects and your new projects, but you also have indigodesign.com. So with indigodesign.com, this actually goes out to the cloud service. Now keep in mind, this is a cloud service that we host, but you can also, we have a SKU that allows you to house Indigo Design on your local server. So if you don't want your designs in the cloud, you don't want your team working in the cloud, you want to use your local infrastructure, great, we provide that. But the nice thing here is if I click Indigo Design, it's saying, hey, there's no published shares in personal workspaces yet. I can jump down to my community workspaces and see all the stuff that the community has published, and I can say favorite, so things that I may have favorited. So the neat thing is that I can go ahead and right from Indigo Design in my team workspace, download stuff right to Indigo Studio. So now if we want to go right to Indigo Design, let me just pop open a new tab here, and let's go to our dev.indigodesign.com, and you'll see here that very similar UI. I've got my shares, my usability studies, which we went into detail in our last webinar, but we'll talk about again on the 8th, my recently viewed favorites. But this is a new feature. So I can click my drop down. I've got personal workspaces, and I've got the ability to create a new workspace, and I got my community workspace. So here I created a JSON test workspace, and from here I can simply invite members via email, and now they're in my workspace. So the idea is I have my own projects in my enterprise. I only want certain people to look at them. I don't want everyone to view them, and I want to have an easier way to manage all these team members. I can invite very easily through indigodesign.com through these team spaces. So very exciting feature. Again, this ships November 8th, so stay tuned for information from Infragistics about that, and we'll have another webinar around Indigo Design and Indigo Studio then. And finally, let me pop open Report Plus. So Report Plus, we shipped earlier this year. Actually, this summer was the first release date for the WPF version, which is also the embedded version. So you can take Report Plus and you can embed this entire dashboard experience into your own WPF apps. So each one of these, in fact, if I just go to the initial experience of starting up Report Plus, I've got my personal dashboards, and then this is all going to the cloud. So up in the Report Plus cloud, I have all of these examples as well. So if I want to go ahead and open up revenue and profitability, I get a nice visualization here. I can jump into this visualization. I can view the actual data behind it by going back and forth. I can do a full screen mode. So if I'm doing a kiosk view, I can have this and it can actually rotate between visualizations. So there's a lot of neat capability here. And what I really like to show is that you're doing Report Plus on a desktop. You can create reports on your desktop, but you have the same exact capability here on your mobile phone. So let's go ahead and open up Report Plus on my mobile phone. And it's going up to the cloud. And you'll notice same dashboards. Let's go to samples. I have the same exact ones here. So look at, let's go to our revenue and profitability one. Same exact dashboard. Touch first, modern mobile experience. Looks beautiful, instant touch, etc. across the board. So I can do this on any screen, desktop, mobile phone, iPad. And what's even cooler, believe it or not, is not only on the desktop, if I click edit, oops, now I'm inside of my edit experience. So you'll notice I've got my fields here, columns, rows, etc. On the right-hand side, I can change the visualization type that I'm actually displaying here. So I can decide like, hey, how should I craft this chart? So very similar to what you do in Excel, right? You're tinkering around, you're making it perfect, you're setting properties. You can do all of that here. You've got different property settings, different filters, linking between charts, different customizations on refreshes, etc. But I've got the same capability here on my phone. So look at that. There's my visualizations, there's my filters, there's my parameters, etc. I can design the same way on my desktop, on my phone, or on my tablet. This was designed as a mobile-first BI dashboarding tool. We actually added the desktop version last, believe it or not. But the enterprise has big desktops, they have big screens. You want to build reports on your desktop. So you have this beautiful story on the desktop for designing dashboards and reports. You have a great story for sharing with users in your organization. You can share to the cloud. You can export to PDF, export to PowerPoint. You can do annotations. You can embed that experience into your own custom WPF apps. And as well, iPhone, iPad, Android, you've got mobile companions. So I can have the same experience for viewing on Android and then viewing and editing on iOS. And then shipping later this month, early next month, is an HTML5 view as well. So I'll be able to basically look at my dashboards and reports anywhere, any device, doesn't really matter. So I always want to highlight that as an ultimate subscriber, you get all of those capabilities in Report Plus as part of your subscription, which is pretty exciting. All right, so let's jump back here on the slides. We have a couple minutes left. I just want to close out. Thank you for getting through all the slides with me and doing those demos. I think the demos are really where you get to feel the product and kind of what we're doing there. But what we want to show is, again, we've done a lot of work on 16.2, on 16.1 this year. Go look at some of our showcase samples. We have a ton of inspirational samples, inspirational designs. They cover mobile scenarios, desktop scenarios, Windows Forms, WPF, HTML5. In fact, when we send mailers out pointing folks to these pages, they're the most read and open mailers that we ever send, like every time we do it, every few months. But you can see the reason we do these is to inspire. We want you to get inspired by what you can do with the components, how you can push the limits of the experiences that you can deliver to your customers, and how you can give like super modern, super awesome experiences across any platform. So iOS, WPF, Windows Forms, HTML5, Cordova, it really doesn't matter. And then we're going to continue to do that with Ignite UI JS blocks, Angular 2, React. So we're just going to continue to add newer, cooler examples of how you can use the components on every platform. Also, we want you to learn from others. We have a ton of great case studies and video case studies online across all of the products, and even some of the great work we've done from a services perspective. So not only do we build and ship product, we also have a whole UX and UI services division here at Infragistics, where we help customers go through the whole ideation design process using Indigo Studio, of course, and then building out with our products. So go check out our case studies. And then really what we want to say is with Infragistics, be part of that next wave of innovation. Go get Ultimate today, infragistics.com/ultimate. Go download the embedded SDK for Report Plus. Start figuring out how you can deliver modern enterprise dashboarding and reporting analytics in your applications for your customers with Report Plus. And then finally, November 8th, stay tuned. Indigo Studio and Indigo Design is a huge launch. We have a lot of great new features. I touched on Team Spaces today. We're going to go into that a whole lot more during the November 8th launch. But overall, design, develop, test, and then experience those products. That's what we want you to do, and that's what we want your customers to do. So with that, we'll take questions online or on the YouTube when this posts. But I want to thank you guys for your time today and have fun with Ultimate 16.2. So thank you.